You want to know what the sound of 2.8 million people about to have a real bad day sounds like? It's not a scream, it's a hum, a low 60 hertz vibration that rattles your teeth right before a transformer decides to turn itself into a firework show. I've been listening to that hum for 28 years. My name is Garrett Sullivan, but the guys on the line crew just call me Gar or the old man, depending on whether I'm saving their hides or telling them they wired a substation like a drunk toddler with an erector set. I'm 54 years old, and I worked for Texas Hill Country Electric Cooperative until they decided I was obsolete. My job title was Senior Grid Operations Supervisor. Sounds fancy, right? Like something you'd put on LinkedIn to impress folks who think electricity comes from magic pixies in the wall. In reality, I was a glorified babysitter for a statewide energy grid that was held together by duct tape, prayers, and code, written when Reagan was still asking Gorbachev to tear down walls. I spent my days staring at a wall of monitors that looked like the bridge of the Enterprise if it had been designed by the lowest bidder. My job was simple. Keep the lights on. Keep the AC running so Karen in the suburbs doesn't sweat through her yoga pants, and keep the respirators humming at Methodist Hospital so Grandma doesn't meet her maker ahead of schedule. Most people think the power grid is static. You flip a switch, bulb goes on. Wrong! The grid is a beast. It breathes. It gets hungry. In the morning, when everyone wakes up and cranks their coffee makers simultaneously, the grid yawns and asks for juice. In the afternoon, when the oil refineries are churning and the Texas sun is baking the asphalt at 102 degrees, the grid gets angry. It spikes, dips, throws temper tantrums like a 2-year-old who missed his nap. For the last 28 years, I was the one hand-feeding that beast, tweaking the algorithms, adjusting the load distribution, manually overriding the automated systems that were too stupid to know that a storm front rolling across the hill country meant voltage drops in East Texas. I wasn't management. I wasn't leadership. I was the furniture. The old-timer who knew where all the bodies were buried. The engineers, guys with hard hats and scarred knuckles, they knew me. They'd call my direct line, skipping the automated help desk. Gar, we got a recloser acting funny on circuit 12. What do the sensors say? And I'd tell them, it's not the recloser, genius. It's the squirrel that fried itself on the feeder 3 miles down. Reset the breaker and bring me a beer later. But to the suits upstairs, the ones with MBAs and soft hands, I was invisible. I was legacy cost, an analog player in a digital world. They looked at me and saw a middle-aged ex-Navy guy with coffee stains on his shirt and a can of Copenhagen in his back pocket, sitting in a dark room typing commands into a terminal that looked like DOS. They didn't see the artistry. They didn't understand that my manual settings, tuned over years of watching the grid's quirks, were the only thing preventing a cascading failure every time the temperature hit triple digits. See, my dad helped build some of the original substations back in the 1960s. Real concrete and steel work, not this prefab garbage they throw up now. He taught me that electricity doesn't care about your college degree or your fancy algorithms. It follows the laws of physics, and physics doesn't negotiate. You respect the beast, or the beast bites back. The trouble started about 6 months ago when old Craig Hudson retired from operations. Craig was a hard-ass who smelled like cheap cigars and cheaper whiskey, but he respected the beast. He knew you don't poke a sleeping dragon with a stick. When he left, corporate sent us a replacement. His name was Scott Reynolds. Yeah, Scott. Kid looked like he was 3D printed at a Brooks Brothers factory. He was 29, had teeth whiter than a nuclear flash, and his resume was full of words like synergy, cloud-native optimization, and disruptive efficiency, the kind of buzzwords that make my teeth itch. Scott didn't walk into the control room. He swaggered. He looked at my bank of monitors, my sticky notes filled with voltage calculations, my manual override switches that I'd built myself, and he sneered. To him, I wasn't the expert. I was the bottleneck. He saw my salary and saw a number he could cut to buy himself a corner office. He saw my manual adjustments and called them inefficiencies. Garrett, he said to me on his 3rd day, leaning over my desk smelling like vanilla and arrogance. Why are we manually scheduling load drops for the Exxon refinery? The AI suite should handle that automatically. I looked at him over my reading glasses, the kind you buy at the hardware store because you're too stubborn to admit you need bifocals. Because the AI suite doesn't know that Exxon runs a rogue shift on Thursdays and spikes demand by 40 megawatts in 3 seconds, I said. If you let the autopilot handle it, you'll trip the relays in 3 counties and half of Houston goes dark during rush hour. He just smiled that shark smile. We need to trust the system, Garrett. Data doesn't lie. Data doesn't have intuition, Scott, I shot back. And data doesn't have to explain to the governor why every traffic light from here to San Antonio just went out. He walked away, tapping something into his iPad, probably a note to HR titled Problem Personnel. I should have seen the writing on the wall, written in neon letters. But I was arrogant too. I thought I was untouchable. I thought, they can't fire me. I'm the only one who knows the override codes for the legacy systems. I'm the guy who manually saved the grid during Hurricane Rita back in '05 when every automated system went haywire. I was wrong. Turns out stupid people with power are way more dangerous than a downed power line in a puddle. The atmosphere in the control room changed over the next few months. The other operators, good kids mostly but green, started avoiding eye contact with me. They sensed the shark in the water. Scott started holding vision meetings that I wasn't invited to. He brought in consultants who looked 12 years old and asked questions like, what if we just virtualized the load balancing? Like electricity was an app you could download from the cloud. I kept my head down. I kept the grid running. Summer was ramping up. The heat was building. The beast was getting restless. I tweaked my settings, tightening the tolerances, preparing for peak load season. I was building a safety net for the state, woven out of code and 28 years of hard-earned experience. I didn't know I was weaving my own pink slip. The day it happened was a Tuesday in July. It was already 98 degrees at 9 a.m. The humidity was thick enough to chew. The grid was humming that low, ominous note that meant trouble brewing. I was deep in the code, adjusting the ramp-up rates for the afternoon peak when the door to the control room hissed open. It wasn't just Scott. It was Scott, a woman from HR who looked like she sucked lemons for fun, and a security guard named Wayne who I'd shared donuts with for 10 years. Wayne wouldn't look at me. That's when I knew. My divorce had taught me to recognize that look, the look people get when they're about to deliver bad news they don't want to deliver. The hum in the room seemed to stop, replaced by ringing in my ears. I didn't panic. Navy training kicks in during crisis. You assess the situation, calculate your options, execute your plan. I just felt a cold, hard rage settle in my gut, heavy as a lead vest. They were coming for the old guard. They forgot one thing. The old guard knew all the tricks that kept the castle standing. Scott didn't even have the decency to do it in a private office. He did it right there on the floor, in front of the monitors, in front of the junior operators, in front of God and the entire electrical infrastructure of Texas. It was a power move. He wanted to show the tribe he was killing the alpha. Garrett, Scott said, his voice smooth as snake oil. Can we have a moment? I spun my chair around. I didn't stand up. I wasn't giving him the satisfaction of looking up at him. In the Navy, they taught you never show weakness to an enemy. I'm busy, Scott. The voltage on the north bus is drifting. I need to boost the power flow before noon. That's exactly what we need to discuss, he said, flashing that veneer smile. We've decided to move in a different direction regarding grid management strategy. Effective immediately, your position is being eliminated. The room went silent, dead silent. You could hear the cooling fans in the server racks whirring. The junior operators froze, fingers hovering over keyboards like they were playing musical chairs, and the music just died. Eliminated, I repeated, tasting the word. It tasted like ash. You're eliminating the supervisor. Who's going to run the load balance? The new automated efficiency suite is fully online, Scott said, puffing out his chest like a rooster who just found the biggest worm in the yard. It's AI-driven, self-healing network protocol. It's cleaner, faster, and frankly, it removes the human error element. We don't need manual overrides anymore. I looked at the HR lady. She was staring at a point over my left shoulder, probably thinking about her pension and how many years she had left before retirement. Probably dissociating so she didn't have to feel like the Grim Reaper in a polyester blazer. Scott, I said, my voice dangerously low, you have no idea what you're doing. That efficiency suite is a black box. It doesn't account for the thermal lag on the transformers in Sector 7. It doesn't know that the sensor on the Brazos River crossing reads 5% high because of corrosion buildup. My manual settings compensate for 20 years of quirks like that. If you switch to full auto, you're flying blind in a thunderstorm. We have full confidence in the system, he said, checking his fancy smartwatch. Probably cost more than my truck payment. Wayne will escort you out. You can collect your personal effects, leave your badge and security token on the desk. I stood up then. My knees cracked like gunshots. I felt 20 years older and 10 years younger at the same time. The adrenaline was hitting me, sharpening my vision like combat situations used to. I looked at the big board. The demand curve was creeping up, red line rising like a fever chart. "Okay," I said. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my encrypted USB key, the one that held my custom scripts, my life's work, and dropped it into my coffee mug. Plop. Ceramic met metal. Ruined. "You want the wheel?" "It's yours." "Garrett, please don't make a scene," the HR lady squeaked. "No scene," I said, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair. "Just mathematics and physics. Newton's laws don't care about your quarterly projections." I walked up to Scott, invading his personal bubble. He smelled like fear and breath mints trying to cover up the fear. "Listen to me closely, you corporate pretty boy," I said, keeping my voice low so only he could hear. "My settings are currently holding the frequency variance at 0.02%. The handoff logic is set to transfer load to the peaker plants at 4:30 p.m., but I have a manual dampener set to kick in at 4:47 p.m. to catch the rebound spike when the solar arrays go offline." Scott rolled his eyes like a teenager being lectured about curfew. "We know about the settings, Garrett. We're wiping the custom scripts, going with manufacturer defaults, clean slate approach." I laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound like old machinery starting up. Manufacturer defaults on a grid built in 1970. "Scott, if you wipe my dampener settings and let that AI run the handoff, the frequency is going to oscillate. The harmonics will hit the main bus at exactly 4:47 p.m. I leaned in closer, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. "And the grid will trip. Statewide, you'll have a cascading blackout during rush hour and a heat wave. You're literally unplugging life support to charge your iPhone." "You're being dramatic," Scott said, waving a hand dismissively. "The grid will run just fine without you. Better, actually. We don't need your voodoo anymore. We have algorithms. We have machine learning. We have the future. Algorithms don't sweat when the temperature hits 105, Scott," I said. I looked past him to Diana, the junior operator, a kid who looked about ready to lose her lunch. She was maybe 25, fresh out of engineering school, still believed the textbooks had all the answers. "Diana, listen to me. When the frequency hits 59.75 hertz, don't try to boost it. Isolate the Western interconnect. It's your only chance to save the hospital circuits." "That's enough," Scott barked, his composure cracking just a little. "Wayne, escort him out now." Wayne stepped forward, looking miserable as a wet cat. "Sorry, Gar," he mumbled. "It's okay, Wayne," I said, patting his arm. "You're just doing your job." Unlike some people, I jabbed a thumb at Scott. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. It was an old Navy-issue field jacket, faded and patched but still serviceable. Kind of like me, I figured. I didn't look back at the monitors. I couldn't. It was like walking away from a baby you knew was about to crawl into traffic. 4:47 p.m. "Scott," I said, pausing at the security door. "Mark it down. When the lights go out, remember I told you exactly when the check would bounce." "Get out!" he yelled, his composure finally cracking completely. I walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, that same 60 Hz frequency that powered everything. For the first time in 28 years, that hum didn't sound like job security. It sounded like a countdown timer on a bomb. The walk to the parking lot was the longest mile I'd ever taken, but it wasn't the walk of shame they wanted it to be. I didn't hide my face or hurry like some criminal. I walked with the heavy gait of a man wearing steel-toed boots in a world of loafers. My truck was baking in the sun. A 2013 Ford F-250 rusted around the wheel wells, filled with empty energy drink cans and jumper cables. It fit me, reliable, ugly, and able to haul heavy loads without complaining. The leather seats were hot enough to brand cattle. I threw my box of personal effects into the passenger seat, a stapler, a framed photo of my 2 kids from when they were young, and a half-dead cactus that somehow survived in that windowless cave. Sat there for a minute, hands gripping the steering wheel. I wanted to cry. I really did. I wanted to punch the dashboard and scream about the unfairness of it all. I'd given that place my youth, my back, my marriage when the long hours and emergency calls finally wore Sarah down to nothing. And for what? to be tossed out like a used air filter by a kid whose tie cost more than my truck payment. But tears don't fix circuits, and they sure don't fix stupid. Rage does. Cold, directed, professional rage. I pulled out my phone and found the contact. Wayne Torres, compliance. Wayne was my counterpart in the regulatory dungeon. A chain-smoking, bourbon-drinking auditor's nightmare who hated Scott almost as much as I did. Scott had been dodging Wayne's mandatory safety audits for months, claiming executive privilege and innovation timelines. I typed, "I'm out." Scott fired me effective immediately. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then, what? Is he insane? The summer load profile is active. We're 2 weeks from peak season. I typed back, "He's running the efficiency suite full auto." He wiped my scripts. I told him the handoff crashes at 4:47. He laughed at me. Wayne's reply was all caps. "Jesus, Garrett, that's a violation of NERC standards. He can't run unauthorized software on the control layer without a 30-day review period. He did, and he's bypassing all the manual overrides. Listen, Wayne, watch the approval logs. Did he sign off on the parameter change through proper channels, or did he use his admin override?" A pause, a long pause. I could practically hear Wayne pulling up screens and cross-referencing databases. Then, checking. Holy crap. He used an emergency administrative bypass code. Tagged it as critical system update to skip the board review. He's flying completely rogue. I smiled. It was a grim, wolfish smile. Document it. Screenshot everything. Timestamp it all. When the lights go out, I want his fingerprints on the murder weapon. "Where are you going?" Wayne asked. "I'm going to get a burger, a greasy one, and I'm going to wait." I drove to Hank's Diner, a greasy spoon about 3 miles down the road. It was the kind of place where the menu is laminated and sticky, and the waitress calls you hun without irony. It was 2:30 p.m. The sun was high and merciless. The bank thermometer said 102 degrees. I ordered a patty melt with extra onions and black coffee. The waitress, a lady named Carol who'd been slinging hash there for 20 years, looked at me sideways. "Bit late for lunch, Gare. You usually don't escape that dungeon till 6. "Got early release for good behavior, Carol," I said. "Turns out the state doesn't need me anymore. They got themselves a robot." "A robot?" Carol laughed, pouring coffee that looked thick enough to stand a spoon in. "Honey, the milkshake machine back there breaks down twice a week. Good luck with that." I watched the clock. Every tick was a second closer to peak load. Every tick was the Texas sun beating down harder on transmission lines, heating copper, increasing resistance. The grid was a rubber band being stretched, and Scott had just fired the only guy who knew when to stop pulling. 3:15 p.m. My phone buzzed. Diana, the junior operator. "Gar, readings are twitchy. The AI keeps hunting for frequency set point but can't lock on. It's oscillating plus or minus 0.05 Hz. Scott says it's calibrating." I stared at the message. If I replied, I was working. If I was working, I was liable. And right now, my liability, insurance, was non-existent. 3:45 p.m. Another buzz. Rodriguez, a field engineer from South Sector. "Hey, old man, just got weird orders from control. They want me to disable thermal trip safeties on the main transformer bank at Substation 4. Says sensors are giving false readings." This sounds like suicide. My blood went ice cold. Disabling thermal safeties wasn't just incompetence. That was criminal negligence. Substation 4 was older than disco. The oil in those transformers was older than Scott. If they overheated without safety shutoffs, they wouldn't just trip offline. They'd explode like bombs. I broke my own rule. Typed back, "I don't work there anymore, but if I did, I'd tell you to get that order in writing, signed in triplicate, and stand back about 500 feet when they flip that switch." 4:25 p.m. The lights in the diner flickered. Just once. Quick dip, then back up. The hum of the walk-in cooler behind the counter changed pitch, dropped an octave, then climbed back up. "That was weird," Carol said, looking up from wiping tables. "Not weird," I said, dropping a 20 on the table. That was a warning shot. My phone rang, the main line for the cooperative board of directors, the heavy hitters, the people who could fire Scott. I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times. Let them sweat. Let them see their precious efficiency crumbling in real time. 4th ring. "Hello. Garrett, this is Chairman Hudson." His voice was tight as a guitar string. We have a situation developing. I'm unemployed, Mr. Hudson, I said. I don't have situations. I have free time and a patty melt. Garrett, listen to me, Hudson barked. He sounded like a man watching his pension fund catch fire. We're seeing instability across the entire ERCOT grid. Scott says the system is experiencing unforeseen anomalies, but our field engineers are saying we're about to lose everything. The engineers are right, I said. You're about 22 minutes away from a hard crash. 4:47 p.m. to be precise. Can you talk Scott through a fix? I laughed out loud. Talk him through it? Mr. Hudson, that's like trying to talk a toddler through performing heart surgery. The code isn't there. He deleted it. My dampener scripts need to be rewritten and uploaded manually while the system is live and oscillating. It's like changing the engine in a car going 70 down the highway. Get down here. We'll authorize emergency consulting rates. I want Scott gone, I said. Right now. Escorted out before I step foot in that parking lot, and I want a contract guaranteeing my position as Chief Operations Director with full autonomy over grid operations. Garrett, we can't just... 4:29 p.m., Mr. Hudson. 18 minutes. You negotiate with me or you negotiate with 2.8 million angry Texans when their AC cuts out in 102-degree heat. Long pause. Then, done. Security is walking him out now. I drove back, taking my time. I knew every back road, every shortcut. At 4:42 p.m., I pulled into the parking lot. Wayne Torres was standing at the gate, waving me in like I was the president arriving in Air Force One. Gar, thank God, he yelled. The alarms are so loud you can hear them in the parking lot. I walked into the building like I owned it, because now I did. The elevator opened on chaos. Alarms screaming, red lights flashing, operators shouting readings across the room, and there in the center, my chair. Empty. Waiting. Diana, I called out. Gar, she squeaked, relief flooding her voice. Kill the AI, right now, full manual override. But Scott said, Scott's gone, I'm in charge, kill it. 4:46 p.m. The grid was convulsing. I typed furiously, rebuilding my dampener code from memory while the system tried to tear itself apart. 4:47 p.m. The handoff hit. Solar went offline. Load shifted to gas plants. The frequency spiked toward the danger zone. Then my code kicked in. The digital shock absorber I'd built caught the rebound, smoothed the oscillation, held the line. Green lights, stable frequency, crisis over. The room erupted in cheers. I leaned back in my chair, hands shaking from adrenaline. 2 weeks later, Scott was facing federal charges. His wife had filed for divorce. His career was radioactive. I was Chief Operations Director with a salary that would let me retire comfortable and buy my kids something nice. But the best part? Every night, I go home and listen to that transformer hum in the distance. My lullaby, the sound of a job well done. The beast is fed, the lights stay on, and the old guard keeps watch. That's all we ever wanted.